Hi guys, my name's Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working out of Granada, Spain. Now the last couple of weeks I've made several trips to the desert, largely in Garrafa, around the top of Granada. And we had some astounding photography opportunities, and there's a few things that I thought I'd like to talk about those trips in today's video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, in common with many landscape photographers, I suspect, I surely can't be the only one on the planet doing this, but I get my work back to the studio and start looking through the shots, and there's this feeling that, and this is supported by a quick investigation into focal lengths that I use most often. There's a suspicion that I'm taking the same photograph over and over again. There's a different subject, and I'm happy with a lot of the photographs. A lot of the photographs look great, but I feel that I'm missing a trick, and I don't know quite where this comes from. I suppose it's a mixture of being in your comfort zone, certainly knowing that this photograph is going to look good at this focal length with this particular lens or these lenses or whatever. I tend to do a sort of mid-neo panoramic shots, big context statement shots that look really good, blown up very large, and wide angle shots, often in portrait orientation with foreground leading into the background, interspersed with a bit of macro. So I don't always take the same shot, but there is a measure of frustration that I feel about the fact that, not least the fact that with all this investment in kit and lenses, I'm hammering a couple of lenses to the extent that they've paid for themselves several times over, whereas other parts of the kit have not. And my accountant would definitely agree with that analysis. And the answer is not to get rid of all of the other kit. The answer is to start looking for opportunities to use that kit and make more of it. And I think that this leads into a topic that I've talked about before, which is the difference between taking pictures of a subject and taking pictures about a subject. And in landscape photography, we often hear about, you've got to have a narrative in photography. You've got to, every picture tells a story. What's the story? So on and so forth. And it's a lot easier to tell stories, I think, with photographs with people in them or photographs with man-made objects in them. These photographs tell a story without really being prompted, but photographs in the style that I work in, which is largely pure landscape, tend to be photographs of that landscape and not about that landscape. And in order to flesh that story out, I strongly feel that I need to do more photographs at different focal lengths in order to get a sense of what's going on in that landscape. And some of these landscapes have been, they've been there in the Sierra Nevada, have been there for millennia. And probably hasn't changed all that much, but other landscapes, similar to the Garrafa Desert, which I'm featuring here, has similarly been there for millennia, but it has a fascinating story, and the backstory of it is that it was an inland sea. originally. And we're going back to prehistory here, so this is considerably before the dinosaurs. And that I find fascinating because the landscape is so obviously largely without man-made feature that you can easily feel yourself be transported back. And similarly, if you look at the rock formations, you've got the different colours of rock, and these have been thrown up by geological activity. And, you know, there's a whole story about that as well, which is there for those that know what to look for. Also in the sense of fossils and so on, certainly in the Tabernas Desert, where these photographs are taken, I was able to find quite easily fossilized activities of, fossilized sand and so on, showing literally a snapshot of what was going on there several thousand years ago. And again, it's something that I'm really keen to start to bring across in my photography, partly because I'm not a native to Spain, and so I see it with fresh eyes, I think, which actually opens up a whole new can of worms, in that this sense of over-familiarization with our locality leads us to take it for granted and not to notice things that are clearly obvious. As glorious as it is, and it undoubtedly is spectacular, you tend to get used to it, and so you get that feeling of sort of looking out of the window and going, oof, you know, it's not quite as sunny as it was yesterday, or actually it does rain in Spain, and actually stormy conditions can make for fantastic photographs, so there really is no excuse to get out there. But I think that's a video I would like to do of my local pueblo or Granada, and just like a photo walk and try to capture a story about that location, because really that's what it's all about. That's why we take photographs. I think when I consider my initial exposure to photography, it was when I was given a box Brownie camera as a gift, and I took hundreds of photographs with that. Many of them landscapes, which were extremely disappointing because I hadn't cottoned on to the fact that, if you take a photograph of a landscape with a fixed sort of normal lens with the kind of focal length that those lenses have, you end up with a massively huge foreground and a tiny little shot of the distance. And given that these were all shot on the Yorkshire moors where I grew up, those photographs were most unimpressive. I think the breakthrough came when I took a photograph of my sister's pony and at close up, and that was by far the most impressive photograph I took with that camera. But I digress horribly. I think that with the kit that we use, it's still very easy to get sucked into using the same focal lengths all the time, because we know we can get good photographs out of them largely, and we don't want to deal with the disappointment, if you like, or the frustration of not getting the good photographs. And I think this is a real part of the learning curve with photography, is that we start to learn how to do certain things very well, and we get drawn into doing that over and over again, because of course we get better and better at it. And so this ends up in a place of, I really want to do this photograph differently, and it's not telling the story, it's a photograph of. And interestingly, collections of photographs are much better at telling stories than individual photographs. I think this is a popular misconception. It's a popular idea that I see talked about all the time in podcasts and groups is, you know, you've got to tell a story with your photography, and that's all very well for street photography and so on. It's not quite so easy with landscape photography, and my view is that this is very much about using the camera to its best advantage, using the different focal lengths that you've got at your disposal to create a collection of photographs that tells a story. And I think that's a direction that I'm really hoping to pursue. So the kit that was used on both of these expeditions came down to 3 lenses in the end, and I used 2 of them much more than I used the other one. But the 2 that I used were the Canon 70-200mm f4, really popular landscape photography lens. I used that initially for panoramas, and I used a 24-70 lens for a couple of shots, a couple of mid-range shots, and the 16-35mm wide-angle lens for some shots. Now, in addition to these things, I cheated a little bit because I knew that what I wanted with the panorama, the background of this panorama was miles away, probably about 5 miles away. And I didn't want to bring my 100-400 lens because it's bloody heavy, mainly. And you know, my kit bag already weighs a lot. So, a cunning plan. These things are lens extenders, and lens extenders used to, probably when I first started using them, probably 10-12 years ago, and there was a bit of a price to pay in terms of picture quality, but these are generation 3. This is a 1.4 extender, this is a 2 times extender, so double your focal length, 1.5 times your focal length here. And these are fairly recently upgraded by Canon. These are EF extenders. You can get RF extenders if you're using a mirrorless camera, and they will be even more modern than these 2. But the point I wanted to make was that the picture here of the glass house was shot from a distance of probably well over a mile, using the 2 times extender. Now, using this kind of kit, you're extending your lens, you're putting a lot more weight on the front of the camera, and I say it's absolutely mandatory to use a tripod. There is no way that I can do using a DSLR, certainly, which doesn't have in-body stabilization. There is no way that I can make those shots without a tripod, particularly in low light where I'm leaving the shutter open for a little length of time. So that's the kit. As a side note to that, what I will say is that when I have used mirrorless cameras, the Canon R7 being the most recent example, the in-body stabilization really does help. It really makes a difference, and so you can actually get away with shooting handheld. You've got much more room for maneuver than you have with a DSLR. So that's the kit points that I really wanted to make. Next week we've got a new release from DxO of Pure Raw, and there are some interesting departures from the previous version. There's some quite a lot of progress being made. some interesting capabilities coming on, and I think that's one for every photographer to watch, not just the DxO people, because Pure RAW is designed also as a plugin for Lightroom. It can be used as a pre-processor for any post-processing photographs, so we can use it with Affinity, for example, to get rid of noise, do the lens corrections and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting program. It's affordably priced. Have a look at the video next week where I'll be doing a full breakdown of the capabilities of the newest version. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. I hope this has been interesting, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye now.